Oh, sweet. Are we live?
I don't know what just happened, but
we had this amazing conversation, right?
Gosh, you guys missed all the info.
All the good stuff.
I mean, absolutely fantastic. And you give away the winning lottery numbers.
Right.
Amazing show, everybody. Thank you so much. All right.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
Does that mean that means I'm not late? So that's good.
No, we were not going to get started without you, Greg. Are you kidding me? So now that you guys can hear everybody, hey, Alexandria. Okay. Now I think we should just do a quick recap because I want to be cognizant of the time. We're already at 1:12. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Ray Orsini, founder and CEO of MMN, MSP Media Network, and OITVOIP. And I'm joined by three industry thought leaders, amazing, smart people that I rely on for advice on a regular basis. And we're going to talk about automation and how that affects you. Starting off top left, Mrs. Tara Rummer. How you doing, Tara?
I'm doing great. Better now that we're live.
There we go. Yeah. You know, it's the show so nice we did it twice, right? So Tara Rummer is Director of Community and Events over at Immy.Bot, and also what's your title over at MS Networks? VP Operations?
VP of Operations, but I'm actually transitioning out of that to be Immy completely. So.
Oh, getting subsumed by the robot. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And also joining me is Mr. Frank Gurney, Channel Director of Security Studio. How you doing, Frank?
Doing fantastic. I feel like we're in deja vu right now, and so I won't tell him with my earlier joke.
There you go. And Mr. Greg Sharp, CEO and founder of ZenContract. How you doing, Greg?
I'm very good, thank you. Was a little couple of minutes late, but because of this, now I'm no longer late or tardy, so I'm no longer in trouble. But it's great to be here and nice to see your faces again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining. So we were just talking about, prior to you guys being able to see and hear us, we were just talking about automation and how it affects MSPs and how it can add revenue, how the things to look for. Often we look at automation as a blank canvas. Where do we start? So I went through the dais and I asked, where do you start? What are the impactful things that are not going to have you tied up for 3 or 4 months trying to figure out how to do it? And guys, if you don't mind me summarizing, correct me if I'm wrong, but just to move along, Tara's response was, look at your PSA automation, your workflows, see what you can do in there. Frank came up with the marketing automation that we've seen, right? Whether you're doing a Orbit or a HubSpot or any of them, Hootsuite, any of the thousands of tools out there. And Greg, you came in with billing contract automation, which is right in the wheelhouse of ZenContract. Big fan of eliminating errors and just getting the right stuff out. Moving on to the risk, though, with great automation comes great risk. Tara, let's go to you, and then we'll wrap back around to Frank and Greg so everybody can hear. But Tara, so it's new to me. What risks do you look for when you look at automation? You're automating your workflows, you're getting communications out. Where are the pitfalls?
So I think my biggest thing is, what is the program that I'm using? What's it taking from me, really? Like, does it have a backdoor into any of my systems? What other information is it getting that I'm not putting specifically in there? We are compliant with SOC 2 Type 2. So we have to do, I believe Frank maybe said this before we were on the air, we have to do all of those assessments with all of our vendors to just make sure everything's in line. But for us, that's probably the biggest thing. We don't want people to have access to things they really shouldn't have access to. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's quasi dangerous with automation is typically touching multiple systems, not just a singular one, which brings its own area of risk. And Frank, you brought up the vendor due diligence and making sure that they have their things in place. What are you asking of the vendor? What are you looking for? SOC 2 Type 2, obviously major thing, but what are you asking the vendor when you have someone new come up to you?
Yeah, I think we really want to have an understanding of what they're doing in their business. And so we treat a vendor risk assessment very much like you would treat any risk assessment for any organization. So you look at, administrative physical controls. You look at obviously the internal and external technical controls of the business. And we really want to understand, how are they performing? Are they doing all the right things? And if you don't have a good understanding or you don't have a good feeling about that vendor, it's definitely a time to start to look at others. I think it's important, as Tara mentioned, the other thing is like, what are they connecting to in my, in my systems? And so, you're pressing allow a lot these days. We do it on our phones and everything else. What are we allowing, right? So maybe it should be analyzed what all those things are that are connecting our networks together, because we know more than 50% of breaches come from third-party connections. So, that's something to be concerned about for sure.
But you're not reading the whole EULA before you hit I accept or consent for your
Who does,
organization.
right? Who does?
Yeah, it's okay. I know all the MSPs are blocking organization-wide application consent for everybody but the admins, I'm sure. And if you're not, please go install SIP and go do it immediately. So, Greg, automation risk. I can't imagine something. Obviously, there's security risk, but there's also risk to the automation acting inappropriately or acting incorrectly, right? So contract renewals, the wrong items getting on there, renewing early or changing prices incorrectly. How do you mitigate these things? How do you keep an eye on it?
So there's a decent amount of self-healing awareness that goes on inside of some of the contract automation tools, and if there's not, there should be. But that would be checking against start date and end date in the PSA, which is always the main center of the truth. But Frank brings up some good points. Is that there's a good amount of pen testing and communication assessment that goes on between our integrations between ZenContract and the PSAs, Autotask and ConnectWise being the main ones that we connect with, and also integration into Office 365. There's quite a reasonable amount of rigor that you have to go through and then be rechecked on, and quite a lot of the large MSPs have checked that on our solution to make sure that the automation is not adding to their problem. Obviously, automation as a premise should really be helping you in reducing your workload and improving your compliance and accuracy. That's certainly what we see, but any solution that is not doing that, then it's not really up to scratch, is it?
Absolutely. And Tara, when you're defining these processes, is it like a one and done thing? Is it that you have to go back on a regular cadence? How do you make sure this stays repeatable, scalable as your business evolves?
So processes are never one and done. If somebody tells you they are, they're wrong. They're a growing document, and we go through them, pretty regularly. You pick a handful a quarter, but with our compliance, we have to do it at least once a year. So if you take it into bite-sized pieces, it's a lot easier than trying to do it all once a year.
I think
there's new requirements all the time. So
yeah, I can jump in on that. I think that's a really smart way to go, Tara, is having a look at different processes maybe once a quarter. So if let's say there's 40 in one particular area and going across 10, and just making sure it's still accurate, still compliant, it's still achieving its results, or more importantly, can it be improved? Because these things over time can get better and stronger and faster, and maybe in that little segment you can actually add some more automation into it. It's not necessarily, you wouldn't have a know everything in the first run at it, so they're worth revisiting and improving.
Well, and I'm a big fan of.
I'm sorry, Tara, go ahead.
I'm a big fan of making sure you have a process before you automate something. Darren and I actually talked about it this morning, because we are improving some of our processes currently for our MSP with billing and invoicing and agreements. And he's like, oh, but you have to learn the process first, because we have a new finance person. He's like, Tara will tell you, you're not allowed to automate this until you learn the process. So
yeah, that's something we have internally. I've had it since my MSP days. Dean can tell you, and Alex can tell you, I harp on it a lot at OIT, where the process becomes the documentation becomes the automation. That's how we approach everything. One of the other things we lead by is process, not judgment. I want something simple, scalable, repeatable. If it was a good decision today, it'll be a good decision tomorrow. Not to say we don't review processes, but you want to make sure that it's applicable, and you want to make sure you're following it, right? You made a decision for a reason. One of my favorite examples is the Disney 3 p.m. parades, right? You go to Disney World, 3 different places in the park. You ask a cast member what time's the 3 o'clock parade. They will give you the same answer. They will never say it's at 3 o'clock, but they will. But Disney has a method for communicating it without making you feel stupid, which if we had to create a process for that, that's a very difficult thing, which is why I like that example. But they could figure out how to do it, which means anytime you ask an engineer, what's the process for that? Where's the documentation? They say, well, it depends. just haven't thought about it well enough. Frank, when you're going down and pulling on from Tara's comment about having the procedures first, is there a simple set of questions, or is there anything that applies to any automation task, the questions that you ask? Any 2 questions would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're talking about documentation and processes, that where we're going with this, Ray. I think that it is super important because it is something that you want repeatable. You want every person in your organization to be able to sit in that seat if possible, right? And so, just in asking the questions there, I think that as long as you write them down and you have a set, I don't think that there's a specific question to ask per se. It's having that repeatable process, and that means writing it down, right? So at the end of the day, I think that's our answer there is start writing things down, everything within your business, because again, you have to think if that person doesn't show up tomorrow, who can sit in that seat, who can do it. So I think that's super important from that perspective.
So let me pose a question, Greg. Why are we automating something? Why do we care? And I realize it's somewhat of a softball question, but it's also a quagmire, so I figure it's worth asking.
Look, it's one that we talk to our prospective partners all the time, because contract automations, it's not sexy, and it's certainly not something that someone wakes up in the morning and goes, I really want to tackle that question. And so we're obviously educating them a bit, and we talk about make money, save money, cut risk. And so make money is by automation and reducing time to do something, so you don't have to go back and do it again. And that's a repeatable process that helps you sort of get richer by eliminating some of the time that you're spending on stuff. Saving money is usually around mistakes. So when a contract goes out and it's got the wrong services or billing items or anything on it, and it goes out and results in a bill, then that creates friction, and so you're not getting paid as fast, and which creates larger debtor days, which follows on to harder cash flow for your business, that type of thing. And then cutting risk is if all of your clients are automatically on your master services agreement, your business is less at risk, because there's implications of doing services for a business without an actual underlying set of rules of the game, and so you're implicating yourself in higher risk. So getting the accuracy of your business engagements is highly important. So you make money, save money, cut risk. So that kind of sums it up.
That makes sense, right? You want to protect against the risk. You want to make money. You always want to squeeze that lemon, get as much out of your efforts as possible. Quantifying that, much like marketing, quantifying that is hard. Tara, you have all these. I'll use Immy.Bot as a perfect example. Immy.Bot automates a ton of things. My favorite thing being QuickBooks updates, but just because that's my PTSD from the MSP days. But that automation, how do you take it to management and say, I spent 6 hours developing this, it's a 2-hour project? Like, how do you go to management and say, this is worth this cost and time for us to automate this?
So I think for us, in going to like the MSP management, it's about, we work a lot with engineering companies and chemical industries, et cetera. And so they don't want their engineers to have downtime for anything. So for us, it's me showing them, hey, since we keep everything updated for you, we are mitigating the risks. We are, we hand them those reports. We hand them all our information in QBRs, which we do require of all of our clients. So it's getting in front of it and giving them why we're doing this. And hey, it might be a little bit of a headache on the front end. We deployed ThreatLocker to everybody. Let me tell you, ThreatLocker gave everybody a headache for a little bit, probably because we didn't run the thing long enough. But it's just having those open conversations with your clients and letting them know ahead of the time that you're making things better for long term and you're making them more secure, I think.
Frank, what about you? I mean, you and Greg, you guys are pitching automation, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the value prop here? And it could be for your products or just automation in general. How are you getting it? Because I don't think there's a single engineer on the planet that doesn't understand the value of automation.
Right.
Unfortunately, they're also not the ones signing for the products and buying the services. So they have to pitch it to management. So I'd like to empower them to be able to go and speak effectively. How are you getting that value proposition across so that management can understand it?
It's a great question, because in the MSP space, the cybersecurity stuff is fairly new. And so, in the way you sell that product and what you do, there's a lot of misinformation out there that's going on. And so I love this question because, for instance, risk assessment was truly a vCISO service, and we talk a lot about that in the cybersecurity world these days, and you'll hear a lot about that as you attend shows and events and things. And a lot of vCISOs even today use spreadsheets, right? And so how do you use that as a repeatable process, right? A spreadsheet. Okay, now I have to create something from that once a risk assessment is done. So I have to maybe I've created myself a template or something like that to report out what I've found. But that is not a quick process whatsoever if you're doing that manually for every single person or every organization that you're assessing, right? So, in our process, we like to say we sell hard work, even though everybody's looking for the easy button. There really isn't an easy button where all this stuff is concerned. We automate as much as we can. But you have to ask questions in a risk assessment. It's just something no different than the MSP's days. We had to do a network assessment, and it wasn't just running an automated tool on a network and that's my network assessment. The reality is,
it's not.
How do you understand? How do you understand when was the last backup done, right? How often do we back up? How do you know how fast someone is able to boot up their machine? Things like that, right? So some type of automation there doesn't always work completely. Some things are great. In a risk assessment, it's much the same. We have to ask questions. Once we're done with that process of asking questions and understanding what's happening in that environment, then a lot of the rest can be automated. So all those reports we're talking about, scoring it, so it's something that people understand. And then on top of that, building out a roadmap of project work. So we can automate all of those pieces that truly in a manual process would be just, hours and hours and hours and hours of work.
Yeah, so, it becomes a hard thing of defining where the most meaningful actions are going to take place, right? That's why I love automation. I want to automate the mundane, the droll, and I want all my interactions with the client to be meaningful ones. If I got to get on a phone, get on a video, whatever, or be in person, I want it to be something meaningful, not something holding a screwdriver, typing on a keyboard. Greg, before I go to you with the same question, Ryan in the chat asks, what did Greg say again? Automate to make money, save money, and what was the last one? Do you remember?
Cut risk. So eliminate risk.
There you go. Yeah, thank you, Brian. Brian jumped in too. And also, it's a good time to remind you guys that this is being recorded, and Channel Program will put out the recording afterwards. So, and maybe it'll include our first round of the beginning of the episode. We'll see. So, Greg, help me here. You've heard the other panelists. How do you convey value? How do you get that understanding from the other party when you're trying to espouse the benefits of automation?
Yeah, look, we're all about getting the contract accuracy correct, and so we want to make sure everyone's got an MSA. We have an MSA manager. It gives you a score out of 100. So if you have 100 clients and 95 of them have got your MSA and have got it signed, it gives you a score of 95. None of it's particularly complicated, but it's an easy area to see, is my business protected? And do you want to automate the process of sending out those MSAs? And if I'd like to, I think everyone on this call, and I can say this with some heart because I come from the MSP background, having done it for 25 years. If I wanted to update my MSA to all of my clients, I think we had 170 before we sold. There was a couple of week process sending it out by email and making sure they were signed and then storing them and all that type of thing. So our MSA manager handles that from end to end and gives you a score so that it's identifiable as to exactly how you are being measured and how I'm improving. And the same thing with renewals. It will give you a score back as to whether you're getting accuracy with your renewals or missing them, and allowing you to get more accurate. And I think that's probably a long-winded way of saying how do you convey value is, would you like to get to 100% contract compliance? Would you like to be accurate with your customers? Would you like to be viewed by your customers as on the ball, using technology in a great way, making sure you're accurate, making sure both parties are protected, and you can really take the lead using some of this automation to make your MSP stand out?
And that leads perfectly into our next topic of, what are some common problems with contract creation execution? You hit it right on the head. It's, you need to make some changes, and you want your MSA to be universally applicable. I don't think most of the MSP attorneys agree on that. But doing it effectively, efficiently is very, very, very difficult. What about, Tara, I want to ask you this, because you started with the PSA, and the PSA is generally where we're doing, at least in my days of using Manage and other PSAs, that's where your opportunities live. That's where your leads live. That's where your contracts live. Did you ever use automation on contracts maybe to discover additional sales opportunities or additional ways to get stack alignment?
So we did, but not probably the best that we could have, honestly, because we used Manage as well, and we weren't using something like a ZenContract to get that. But with stack homogenization, I'm not going to be able to say that word, homogenizing our stack, we're going to go that route.
That's why I say stack alignment. It's easier on the tongue.
There you go, alignment, yeah. So we did find a lot of that. Even we still have a few clients on our, on contracts that aren't fully MSP. We do a lot of co-managed, but we still want them to have basically our entire MSP stack. So we were able to find some through there as well. Yeah.
So Greg, let me go back to you. And actually I had the same experiences as Tara. We did it. I don't know if effectively is the right answer, but it definitely got done, right? What do they say? Perfection's the enemy of good. But you obviously have built a company around solving for some of the challenges that traditional PSAs can't manage. What are the benefits of using a specialty tool like ZenContract to solve these challenges?
The biggest thing you get straight out of the box, Ray, is a process to follow, right? So we have an MSA with a service schedule. We get the MSPs to segregate all of their terms and conditions out of their standard managed services agreement, which is what most of the industry does. They will have, these are the services we provide. These are the services, the costs that they're going to be charged. And here's all of our terms and conditions. And they send that out every single time. And that just slows down the sales process. Every time you send it out, those legals have to go through either, like Frank said earlier on, even someone just signs it and doesn't read them, or it goes off. If it's a larger organization, a larger MSP client, they will more than likely have to put that contract through their legal teams for someone to have a read of, and it just slows it all down. So we get them to separate out the terms and conditions and everything legalese into a master services agreement. We then have an automated process with reminders that says, these are all the contracts that are coming up for renewal in the next 90 days. This is what you're currently supplying them. These are some suggested new lines of service that you should go along with them. If they're not got your advanced security product or your managed network, maybe you should be sending that out as well. And it automates the process of sending those out. But what's great about it is it's automation, but it's not just blind automation. It's automation. It's kind of like going bowling, 10-pin bowling with those guardrails up on the side, because it gives a process to your MSP account management team, your sales team, to be able to follow automatically. So you end up with a repeatable outcome. And one of my mentors always said to me, Ray, is good business is built on repeatable process. And so you always know that the contract's signed by both parties. You know that it's always stored in your SharePoint infrastructure. You know it's always referenceable. You know it's accurate. All of the things that we would have loved when we were just doing them by Word documents and sending them out and negotiating them by email and then never storing them in the right place. It eliminates all of that risk to your business. So you get a good repeatable process.
So Frank, risk compliance, this is your world, right? This is, you are the guy. So let me ask you, when it comes to contracts and compliance, how does the automation help get closer to that goal of, fully compliant?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Greg said, right? Being able to see all of those kind of data points, right, or dates, really, at the end of the day, is something we couldn't do in the past. We would create a contract and it'd be out there. We didn't, necessarily have visibility unless you dropped it into a calendar or something. But having the visibility, I think, is really important when it comes to being compliant. Being able to look at all of that information and have it in one place and be able to manage it. Because, if you have contracts floating out there, whether it's a physical security thing, like I just have all of this data sitting in a open cabinet somewhere, right? I mean, that's a physical security type issue that could cause issues with your compliance. Do I have these contracts on unsecure computers, right? So all of those types of things. So really looking at how we have that, if we're managing that from one tool in the cloud potentially, and they have compliance with that vendor, then that's going to put you in a much better position than kind of the latter.
And that's kind of the if we went down to the basal benefit of automation, it's really that: do it once and have it just keep going and going and going. And so that goes to the other side of creating revenue. It's not just about creating revenue, but it's also about lowering our costs, right? Lowering, whether it's headcount, whether it's man hours, human hours, whatever it is. But there comes a cost, especially when we're getting people to do these automations. Typically, they're a little higher paid than, it's not an average tier 1 that's doing these automations, right? Hopefully not yet anyway. One day, maybe. Tara, VP of Operations at METS Networks, I imagine you had to worry about headcount and resource management and total cost and all that stuff. How did automation help you in those arenas?
I still worry about it. Let's be honest. Not something I stopped worrying about.
Never goes away. Yeah.
So for our MSP specifically, when we put processes in, and that's actually why they moved me into the operations role, we saw a jump in our profit. And then when we started actually automating things, we saw another jump, and we never had to increase our headcount. And I would tell people, and I thought it was normal for other companies because we are so automation focused. We're very automation forward as an MSP, obviously, because we spun off a SaaS product. But it's something that I've realized recently other companies aren't doing. And what we're trying to do with Immy.Bot is we're actually trying to lower that barrier of entry into automation, because not everybody has that high level scripting person, right? And we want to be able to bring in your tier 1, tier 2 techs and have them able to do this stuff. Because you don't want your highest paid person really working on like imaging and deployments. That's not a really good high use of time, honestly. But for us, it's been great.
Stare at the status bar the entire time. Are you kidding me?
I love watching progress bars. Are you kidding me?
One of my favorite things is I was installing, this is before Immy existed. I was installing Windows on 2 laptops, and I have a picture on Facebook. That's how far back this goes. And on one laptop, it says, getting things ready will be available shortly. And then on the other one, same window, but it says this is going to take a while. It's like, talk about conflicting messages here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the fun stuff. Let's see, Dean, just because I kind of, speaking of compliance and risk, I leaked some of the questions I was going to ask in the regular chat. Dean says, only because I know you're going to ask Tara, but during one of the massive merges, Immy let us lift and shift tools with a few clicks, which meant that I could have a single automation engineer do the entire tool shift.
See?
Hey, that's a win, right? Back in Dean's MSP days.
Yeah.
All
and
right,
so
go ahead.
What I told the devs when we started building Immy, they thought developers were their target market. And I straight up was like, I am the least technical person in this company. If I cannot deploy software, we're targeting the wrong person. Like, I need to be able to do it. That's when we kind of transitioned our focus.
Oh, yeah. That's actually something we hold true at OIT and MMN is once documentation is created, I want somebody non-technical, non-experienced, non-trained to be able to follow it. That's the base requirement for it. Greg, you live in automation. This efficiency has to equate to saving some account management time, saving some sales time. Where do you see the most efficiencies gained here?
So what we're seeing across the MSP client base that we have already is pretty commensurate with what we had in my MSP a couple of years ago when we sold it. We were spending around about 55 hours a month just managing existing contracts, nothing to do with new opportunity management or going and cross-selling or upselling, just managing the existing ones. And so once we built the system and implemented that went down to 1.5 hours. So you're getting that, significant saving in time, but you're also seeing accuracy go from being 40% accurate. An accurate contract in our world is one that is got the right services on it, the right billing on it, signed by both parties, and it's referencing the master services agreement. Ours was only 40%, and as soon as we had a system like this in with rules to follow and automations there and reminders going off, it went right up to 99%. So those are the two things that are really important. And we used to have a commercial ops person, quite unamazingly, really. Actually, she ended up being in charge of our automation and making sure and identifying the next processes that we could automate inside our MSP. And like Tara said, we saw a real jump in profitability. And that was one of the main reasons when I sold the MSP, we split out ZenContract, because I think it was applicable for many other MSPs. And obviously the automation that we have is on the front side of the business. It's dealing with customers and their contracts and making sure they're signed and things. There's many other areas of automation to be done. But we saw such a jump in profitability and no extra headcount by undertaking this wider program of work, which I know we're deeming as opportunity, as automation and process automation. But once you start down this journey, you do your first little thing and you get a win, and then you do a little bit more and you get another win, and it really starts to snowball.
Absolutely. And one of the things I should bring up is that not everybody sees automation as a benefit, right? There's a certain subset of employees that see it as, this is taking my job away. I personally don't feel that way, because I feel that, again, take away the meaningless interactions. I'm sorry, staring at a status screen is not a meaningful interaction, and train the employee up to do more meaningful things. Usually you have more time because of automation to train people and develop staff internally. But there are going to be some staff that look to leave because automation is happening. Frank, that's right in line with risk, in my opinion, right? Because you spend a lot of dollars finding and hiring the person, training the person, giving them access to your internal knowledge and clients and systems and resources. And now that font of information is possibly going to leave. Any tips on how to identify that, how to identify employees who are looking for growth or other things elsewhere, and maybe ways to keep them?
Yeah, the funny thing is, in our world, I think it's almost the opposite, right? Because the automation can help an employee so much more, especially, I was talking about spreadsheets and manually creating reports and creating roadmaps and action items to take. That means that you can deal with many fewer clients, right? You as an employee don't have as high of a value if you can't bring in as much revenue. So the reality is, the automation that we provide, at least through risk management, is helping employees understand that they can bring more revenue in as an employee. So the VCSOs really can handle more business, which is a really nice thing. So it kind of is the opposite of that. Now, I think AI is a whole nother topic, right? And so, that's one of those things that's coming in and really playing with a lot of people's heads, as far as, could this take my job, or could things like that? And, but I think, at least in our world, from compliance and risk and that sort of thing, automation is only helping. And there's less of that, feel of like, that's going to take my job, because it's not a complete automation. And I said it earlier, we sell hard work, right? It's a professional service that they're providing. So their knowledge, once they've done or take someone through that assessment, is really beneficial. And AI is not going to do that. It's not going to be able to ask the right questions every time. Can it get there someday? I don't know. But, that's a big one.
So Dean brings up the question, how do you help employees make decisions when the automation fails, stops, or isn't appropriate? Frank, do you have any tips to that?
Yeah, and that comes down to being a subject matter expert, being an SME, right? I mean, that's why we all kind of live this world. The more that you can learn and understand, and be knowledgeable in the subject matter, you're the one that holds the value, right? It's not the tool, it's not the automation, it's not the AI, it's none of those things. it's you as a person. And we use all of those things as tools to help us do our job better. But at the end of the day, you're the one who should be able to answer those questions and ask the right questions to your customers and your clients, I think.
What about you, Tara? What do you say here?
So this is going to go back to why I say you have to have a process before you have automation, right? Because automation isn't flawless. We'd love to think it is. Maybe in a few years it will be. But you need to have that original process that someone can roll back to. And you also need to understand, and you can explain it to staff, that not everything can be automated. And probably not everything should be automated. We always have to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze on this? If it's something I do once every 6 months that takes me 10 seconds, should that really be automated? Probably not, because I'm going to spend 8 hours automating it. So it's teaching those kind of good habits to your staff on the front end, I think.
Yeah, getting your employees as much training as possible, I think, is the biggest thing, right? And understanding and knowing every bit of that process.
Yep.
Yeah. Great.
So, okay, so let me ask you guys now. You guys are all representatives of vendors in our space that deal with automation and can make our lives better. Normally, most shows would do that at the beginning of the show, give the whole description and the whole pitch of what the vendor does. I wanted you guys to be able to show your value first, your thought leadership. I want everybody else to see how much, why I hold you guys in such high esteem. So we'll start with Tara, just because Darren's one of my favorite human beings on the entire planet.
And I am too.
Oh, you are absolutely with the, can I call them parade hats? I
have one right there. I'm going to put it on in a second. I figured once we're done with all this, I'll put it on.
So talk to me about Immy. What does Immy.Bot do for those that don't know?
So Immy.Bot automates workstation deployments, and it's not just about deploying new workstations. We also maintain it for you. So that, I think, is the big thing that's missing when people are imaging computers, et cetera. And we're looking potentially at some point to replace RMMs, because an RMM, you still have to have that high level person who can write these scripts for you, who can keep all of this updated for you. The reality is we have over 1,100 pieces of software in Immy.Bot that we keep updated and we keep maintained. That's really it. We're lowering the barrier of automation. No more level 3 need to be doing it. So that's what we do.
So Dean
awesome.
Says he came for the hats. I'm just going to tell everybody, you're making hats for everybody in the audience. Kidding.
I am not doing how long these things take to make. I will put it on.
Why don't you automate it? Why don't you? So
because it's better
while she's getting the hat, Greg, why don't you tell us about ZenContract? Tell us about why it exists and what problem you're solving.
So I think that I've probably mentioned a couple of times, Ray, that I've been in the MSP game for a while. We identified that we were low on accuracy for our contracts. We wanted to make sure that we could get more contracts and upsell and cross-sell, not miss any reminders, making sure that all of our MSAs were out and signed. If we wanted to get any update to our MSAs, well, there we go. I can't keep up with that sort of hat. But making sure that you're mitigating your risk, and but more importantly, you're reducing all of that time, which is sucked into the world of managing contracts and creating contracts and getting them out into the hands of people and getting them signed and stored in the right places. We wanted to eliminate a lot of that through automation and make sure the industry as a whole is a lot more protected. There's a lot less risk in the industry, and a lot more time can be spent on growing their businesses rather than managing existing contracts.
I feel like Greg just teed it up for you, Frank.
Right, exactly.
I mean, you couldn't ask for a better lead-in than that. So tell us about Security Studio, man.
Yeah, so Security Studio is a risk management platform. So we're a tool that allows MSPs really to start a whole new line of business, honestly. It's a new professional service that maybe they haven't been doing in the past. And really, I like to say, the MSP world has lived in the S and SMB, small business, right? And this type of solution really opens the M up, the medium-sized business, who today, much like the MSP, why they became managed service providers, they had to, they were the outsourced IT company for small businesses. many medium-sized or larger businesses need to outsource vCISO services because, you know, a vCISO might cost $250,000 a year, and they can only do so many, you know, organizations or their own organization. And so this is a whole new opportunity for MSPs to start down this road. The interesting thing is that risk assessment in itself is the first thing that anybody should do in a cybersecurity engagement. And cyber is everywhere, right? So whether you're putting in endpoint protection or you're putting in SOC SIM services or whatever you're going down the line of cybersecurity solutions, as I mentioned earlier, the first thing that you do when you go out to do a new managed service engagement is a network assessment. Well, in the same respect, when you go out to a cybersecurity engagement, you're going to do a risk assessment. And so we make that task easy. We teach our folks how to do that. We have a academy to train them to become vCISOs, which is amazing. And at the end of the day, that's not about our tool, but it's about the business side of things. So how do I become a vCISO and start this? And the last thing I'll mention in all of this is this: your customers think you're doing this for them. So that's the biggest issue that you run into right now. All the cybersecurity stuff, it's expected from the MSP client. They hear about breaches, they hear about things going on out there. They're not worried because we did a good job as MSPs selling them on, hey, we got you covered, right? We're your IT guys. We're the technical resource. So when you think about this stuff, it really is in your best interest to go back out to your existing clients and do a risk assessment and then provide them your stack of services that you think that they need. And you just gain revenue and you are then taking care of your customer. On top of that, you're kind of covering your own ass as well. So there's that.
I mean, and we've all been in the MSP space a long time. We've all heard from clients where they thought we were covering something. I remember when HIPAA became a thing, you know, client came up to me and she was like, yeah, you're doing this already, right? I'm like, wait, hold on. This is a conversation. And it's funny because even the most experienced of clients, I had FDA clients and FDIC regulated clients, and they absolutely were doing the same thing. They'd come and say, this is a new thing, but you're already covering us, right? And it's a whole conversation. Well, thank you so much for being on, guys. I put the links to all three of you in the chat. So if anybody wants to go check out Immy.Bot, ZenContract, or Security Studio. Tara, you're always doing stuff. Where are you going to be next?
I go tomorrow to Write a Boom. So if you guys are going to be at Write a Boom this week, I will be there. I will be at CompTIA CCF next week, representing the Immy team, and then at Enable Empower. And we are doing, actually, since this is on channel program, if you've used Immy.Bot, we're doing a giveaway for MSP GeekCon if you review us. So we'll be at MSP GeekCon as well, and we're doing like an all expenses paid trip. So yeah.
And I'm totally not going to steal that idea. And I swear I'm not stalking you, but I'll be at Rob and CCF as well. What about you, Frank? What are you doing next, and where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks so much. Next week, I will be at MSP Summit with Astra Cybersecurity. And so that should be really fun. If you're going to be there, shoot me an email, fgurney@securitystudio.com. We are doing a speakeasy event at the Mob Museum there. So I'd love to have you guys there, any of you that are on. So if you're going to be out in Vegas next week, let me know. And then the week after that, I'll be in Houston with ASCII. So those are my kind of next up and coming, but love to see you.
I'd swear you would say I was full of it. This is our speakeasy sticker. We're doing a speakeasy at Write a Boom also on
cool.
Fridays.
Yeah.
So
Nice. There you
good.
go.
Great minds, right? And wrapping it up, Greg, what about you? What are you doing next? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so we'll be at the Connect show next month in Vegas, and obviously a long way to fly from me, all the way from New Zealand, but enjoying getting to the States as often as I can. So that's our next round.
Awesome. And I will be at Write a Boom and CCF, and then I think my personal next event is MSP GeekCon. So very much looking forward to it. Thanks to Channel Program for letting us take over their airwaves for a little bit and talk about automation. Hopefully we've given you a little bit of value, so you can go hit that automation right on and get it done for your MSP, show the value. If you have struggled telling your management why you need MSP, reach out to any of the three of these. The LinkedIn's are in the chat. They're happy to help you. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of this. I wish you to take care of each other and yourselves. I've butchered this all day. I'm tired. I'm sorry. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Ray. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.